They called her just a transport pilot and laughed when she asked to fly the $2.1 billion B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, until Chinese J-20 fighters appeared over the Pacific and everyone discovered the cargo driver was actually a former Nighthawk pilot who had penetrated enemy airspace that didn't exist on any map. Watch till the end, because what this woman did next made the Pentagon classify her entire existence for national security. The morning Pacific fog rolled across Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri as Captain Jessica Chen walked across the tarmac toward the most expensive aircraft ever built. The B-2 Spirit stealth bomber sat in its climate-controlled hangar like a mechanical ghost, its flying wing design so radical it seemed to defy the laws of physics. At $2.1 billion per aircraft, each B-2 represented the pinnacle of American aerospace technology, capable of penetrating the most heavily defended airspace on Earth while remaining virtually invisible to enemy radar systems. To the elite bomber pilots preparing for another day of strategic mission training, Jessica was an outsider, a transport pilot who flew cargo runs in personnel shuttles while they commanded the most sophisticated weapons platform in military history. At 34 years old, with jet black hair pulled back in a regulation bun and the quiet bearing of someone who had learned to avoid attention, Jessica carried herself with the deliberately unremarkable manner of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of invisibility. What none of the B-2 pilots knew was that Jessica's transport pilot cover was carefully constructed camouflage, designed to hide a background so classified that even acknowledging her previous existence could compromise ongoing national security operations. Her real identity had been buried so deep in Pentagon black files that officially, the woman they dismissed as a cargo driver had never existed at all. "Hey, bus driver," called out Major Tom Bradley, a cocky bomber pilot from Colorado who'd graduated from the Air Force Academy with honors and never let anyone forget his elite status. "Make sure you don't scratch the paint while you're gawking at a real combat aircraft." His B-2A Spirit sat in the hangar bay like a sleeping predator, its gray stealth coating pristine and unmarked. Bradley had 340 hours in the Spirit and considered himself one of the Air Force's most elite strategic bomber pilots. Jessica nodded politely and continued walking, methodically checking her tablet for the day's transport assignments. She'd heard variations of this dismissive mockery countless times over the past 6 months since arriving at Whiteman. To Bradley and the other bomber pilots, she was functionally invisible, someone who flew glorified bus routes while they prepared for missions that could reshape global conflicts. What they didn't know was that Major Jessica Chen had more than 280 hours in the B-2 Spirit, earned during the most classified penetration missions in modern military history. Her previous assignment had been with the 393rd Black Knights Bomber Squadron, where she'd flown missions so secret that even their existence was denied by the Pentagon. Her transport pilot assignment wasn't a demotion. It was the perfect cover for investigating security breaches that had compromised 3 separate stealth bomber operations over the past 8 months. "Chen, I need those supply manifests reviewed before noon," Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb called from across the hangar. At 48, Webb commanded the transport operations with the methodical efficiency of someone who understood that logistics were the foundation of military success. The C-130 crews are waiting for cargo confirmation before their next runs to Guam. Jessica quietly acknowledged the order and continued her routine, positioning herself near the maintenance areas where she could observe bomber operations without attracting attention. Her transport duties provided perfect access to flight schedules, personnel movements, and classified logistics information. Exactly the kind of comprehensive intelligence that someone selling military secrets would need to maximize damage to national security. The morning briefing called for long-range penetration training over the Pacific Test Range, a massive area of restricted airspace where bomber crews practiced missions that simulated strikes against heavily defended targets. 2 B-2 Spirits would conduct extended-range navigation exercises, testing their ability to operate independently across vast distances while maintaining complete stealth profile. It was exactly the kind of complex, high-stakes mission Jessica had flown dozens of times during her classified career when she'd operated under the call sign Shadow and had conducted some of the most dangerous strategic reconnaissance flights in Air Force history. Major Bradley reviewed his flight plan with the arrogance of someone who'd never faced adaptive enemy defenses. "This is going to be routine," he told his wingman, Major Sarah Rodriguez, a competent pilot from California who'd earned her bomber wings through standard training progression. "The B-2's radar cross-section is smaller than a large bird. We could fly over Beijing and they'd never detect us." Jessica paused in her equipment check to listen more carefully. Bradley was making the classic error of technological overconfidence, assuming that stealth capabilities alone could guarantee mission success. She'd seen pilots with identical attitudes fail catastrophically when faced with emerging detection technologies or unexpected tactical situations. "Stealth is our primary advantage," Major Rodriguez replied thoughtfully, "but it's not absolute protection. New radar systems are constantly being developed, and overconfidence has destroyed more missions than equipment failure ever has." Rodriguez was absolutely correct, Jessica thought while continuing her methodical review of transport schedules. The B-2's stealth technology was genuinely revolutionary, but it required precise flight techniques, constant awareness of environmental factors, and intimate knowledge of enemy detection capabilities. Most pilots learned these principles through computer simulations and controlled training exercises. Jessica had learned them by flying missions where detection meant immediate interception by enemy fighters and probable loss of a $2.1 billion aircraft. As the two B-2s prepared for launch, Jessica continued her transport duties, strategically positioning herself near the communication center where she could monitor radio traffic without attracting attention. Her cover job provided perfect access to flight operations, mission parameters, and classified communication protocols, exactly the kind of detailed information that hostile intelligence services would pay enormous sums to obtain. The two B-2 Spirits launched precisely at 10:30 hours. Their four General Electric F-118 engines producing 17,300 pounds of thrust each as they climbed toward their assigned cruise altitude of 50,000 feet. Jessica watched from the operations center, her experienced eye automatically noting the subtle variations in each aircraft's performance during the critical takeoff phase. Years of strategic bombing experience had taught her to identify potential vulnerabilities that other observers might overlook completely. The Northrop Grumman B-2 Spirit represented the absolute pinnacle of strategic bomber technology. With a wingspan of 172 feet, a length of 69 feet, and a maximum takeoff weight of 336,500 pounds, it was designed to penetrate the most sophisticated air defense systems ever created. Its low observable technology made it virtually invisible to conventional radar, while its ability to carry 40,000 pounds of ordnance meant it could deliver devastating strikes against heavily protected targets thousands of miles from friendly territory. 47 minutes into the training mission, the first indication of serious problems began to emerge through intercepted communications that Jessica was monitoring from her transport duty station. "Spirit 1-1, we're showing unusual electromagnetic signatures on our passive sensors." Major Rodriguez's voice carried subtle tension despite her professional training. "Something doesn't match the intelligence briefings about this training area." Jessica's blood ran cold as she recognized the implications. She'd encountered those exact electromagnetic signatures before during a classified mission over the South China Sea, when advanced Chinese radar systems had nearly compromised her stealth bomber during a deep penetration reconnaissance flight. The signatures indicated the presence of quantum radar technology that could potentially detect even stealth aircraft under certain atmospheric conditions. "Spirit 1-1, continue with the training exercise," Major Bradley ordered from the lead aircraft. "Passive sensors often show false readings during extended flights. Your stealth profile remains secure." But Jessica knew with absolute certainty that Bradley was wrong. The electromagnetic signatures Rodriguez was detecting indicated the presence of advanced detection systems that weren't supposed to exist in the Pacific test range. If the B-2s continued their planned route, they would likely encounter radar systems capable of compromising their stealth advantage and potentially exposing classified flight patterns to hostile observation. Jessica stepped closer to the communication equipment, her carefully maintained transport pilot persona beginning to crack as her strategic bomber instincts took complete control. She'd faced this identical threat assessment 3 years ago during a mission so classified that even its existence was denied by Pentagon officials. And she'd barely avoided detection through advanced evasion techniques that weren't included in standard training manual. Spirit 1-1, I need you to alter course immediately to heading 270 and descend to 35,000 feet, she called into the radio, completely abandoning her cover. You're approaching an area with advanced detection capabilities that will compromise your stealth profile. The operations center erupted in shocked confusion. Ground personnel and officers stared at Jessica in complete disbelief, unable to process the surreal sight of a transport pilot giving tactical advice to strategic bomber crews flying the most sophisticated aircraft in the Air Force inventory. Who the hell is this? Major Bradley demanded over the radio, his voice thick with indignation and disbelief. Since when does some cargo pilot think she knows how to fly strategic bomber missions? Get her away from that radio immediately. But Major Rodriguez's voice cut through the mockery and confusion, carrying sudden, genuine concern as her aircraft's warning systems began confirming the threat assessment. Operations Center. My passive sensors are definitely detecting advanced radar emissions that weren't in the mission briefing. These signatures are unlike anything in our threat database. Jessica grabbed the radio handset firmly, despite the shocked protests and attempted interventions of the Operations Center staff. Spirit 1-1, you're being illuminated by quantum radar systems that can detect stealth aircraft under specific atmospheric conditions. Implement emergency evasion protocol midnight and exit the area immediately. Security! Get that transport pilot away from the communication equipment now, Colonel Webb barked from the Operations Center, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. But before security personnel could respond, Major Rodriguez's voice confirmed Jessica's worst fears and validated her threat assessment. Spirit 1-1 confirming radar lock. Unknown aircraft approaching from the northwest. This is not a training exercise. We have hostile contact. The Operations Center fell into stunned silence, except for the sound of urgent warning tones from both B-2 aircraft transmitting over the radio. At 50,000 feet over the supposedly secure Pacific test range, the two most advanced bombers in the world were being intercepted by aircraft that weren't supposed to exist in American airspace. Jessica pushed past the security personnel who were moving to restrain her and took complete control of the radio communication. Her quiet, carefully maintained transport pilot demeanor vanished entirely, replaced by the calm, absolute authority of someone who'd faced this exact tactical situation multiple times before. Spirit 1-1, this is Shadow, she said, using her old classified call sign for the first time in 3 years. I've been through this scenario before, and I'm going to talk you through the evasion sequence. Listen to my voice carefully and follow my instructions exactly. On the other end of the radio transmission, Major Rodriguez's extensive training immediately kicked in, despite the threatening circumstances. The call sign, Shadow, was absolutely legendary among strategic bomber pilots. A phantom aviator who'd conducted the most dangerous and successful deep penetration missions in B-2 history, before mysteriously disappearing from all official records and documentation. Shadow, is that really you? Rodriguez's voice carried a mixture of desperate disbelief and sudden hope. Intelligence said Shadow was killed in action during Operation Black Ice 3 years ago. Focus completely on flying your aircraft, Jessica replied with the steady confidence of someone who'd survived the unsurvivable. Execute Stealth Protocol Delta 7 immediately. Reduce throttle to 85%, descend to 25,000 feet, and implement randomized course changes every 30 seconds. In the Operations Center, Colonel Webb stared at Jessica with dawning recognition and growing shock. The call sign Shadow belonged to Major Jessica Chen, the most accomplished strategic bomber pilot in B-2 program history, who disappeared from active duty after a classified incident that had nearly caused an international diplomatic crisis. Chen, Webb whispered in disbelief. Jessica Chen? But you were officially transferred to transport duty after the Black Ice operation was compromised. Jessica ignored his recognition completely. Her total attention focused on guiding both B-2 crews through the emergency with the precision and confidence that had made her legendary. Spirit 1-1 and 1-2, the hostile aircraft are Chinese J-20 stealth fighters conducting unauthorized reconnaissance over international waters. They're testing their ability to detect and intercept our stealth bombers. Shadow, How do you know the aircraft type? Rodriguez asked, her voice steady despite the life-threatening circumstances. Because I've encountered J-20s before during classified missions over the South China Sea, Jessica replied with matter-of-fact certainty. They're specifically designed to counter American stealth technology, and they're using quantum radar systems that can penetrate our low observable profile under certain conditions. For the next 18 minutes, Jessica talked both B-2 crews through the most challenging evasion sequence of their military careers. Using advanced techniques she'd developed during classified operations that pushed the Spirit beyond all published performance limits, Jessica guided both bombers through a complex series of maneuvers that exploited weaknesses in Chinese detection technology while maintaining their stealth advantage. The evasion sequence required both pilots to manage their aircraft with surgical precision, coordinating altitude changes, course corrections, and speed variations while compensating for atmospheric conditions that could compromise their stealth profile. Jessica's guidance was so precise and confident that it seemed almost supernatural to the officers monitoring the emergency. When both B-2 Spirits successfully evaded the Chinese interceptors and reached secure airspace, the operations center erupted in spontaneous cheers and applause. But Jessica simply set down the radio handset and walked calmly toward the hangar exit, her cover thoroughly blown and her counterintelligence mission completely compromised. Colonel Webb caught up with her near the hangar doors, his expression mixing respect, confusion, and demand for answers. "Chen, we need to talk immediately." Jessica stopped walking but didn't turn around to face him. "My name is Jessica Chen. I'm a transport pilot assigned to cargo operations." "Cut the cover story," Webb said firmly. "I know exactly who you are. Major Jessica Chen, call sign Shadow, former chief pilot for the most classified B-2 programs in Air Force history. You were supposed to be transferred to non-combat duties after Operation Black Ice was compromised." Finally, Jessica turned to face Colonel Webb directly. For the first time since arriving at Whiteman Air Force Base, she stood with the full bearing and unmistakable presence of the elite strategic bomber pilot she actually was. "Being assigned to transport duty has significant operational advantages, Colonel. It allows you to investigate security leaks and counterintelligence threats without being detected or compromised." Webb's expression shifted from confusion to rapid understanding. "You're here on an active counterintelligence mission. The same security breach that compromised Operation Black Ice and 2 subsequent stealth bomber missions has been selling classified flight patterns and tactical procedures to Chinese intelligence services," Jessica explained with professional precision. "Someone with access to our most sensitive operational data has been providing detailed information about B-2 capabilities, flight routes, and detection vulnerabilities. And you've been working undercover as transport personnel to identify the source of the leak." Jessica nodded confirmation. "Transport operations have access to comprehensive logistics data, flight schedules, and personnel movements for all bomber operations. Over the past 6 months, I've systematically identified the security breach and gathered sufficient evidence to prosecute everyone involved in the espionage network." That evening, Jessica's meticulous counterintelligence investigation led to the coordinated arrest of a senior logistics officer, a civilian contractor with access to classified flight data, and a foreign national who'd been systematically selling B-2 operational information to Chinese military intelligence. The security breach that had compromised multiple strategic bomber missions and nearly resulted in the loss of 2 aircraft was finally eliminated. The next morning, Jessica found herself standing in Colonel Webb's office wearing her proper Air Force uniform for the first time in 6 months. Her strategic bomber wings and major's insignia restored and visible, her true identity finally revealed. "The Pentagon wants you back in active bomber operations immediately," Webb said, sliding classified orders across his desk. "Your counterintelligence mission is officially complete, and Strategic Air Command needs your expertise more than ever." Jessica looked out the window at the B-2 Spirits in their protective hangars, their stealth surfaces requiring constant environmental control to maintain their low observable properties. "What about Majors Bradley and Rodriguez? They both specifically requested to thank you personally. Rodriguez says your guidance saved both aircraft and prevented a major intelligence compromise." "They don't owe me anything," Jessica replied simply. "That's what we do for each other when national security is at stake." Later that day, when Major Rodriguez approached Jessica on the flight line, she was no longer wearing transport utility uniforms. She stood in her proper flight suit bearing the wings and insignia of one of the Air Force's most elite strategic bomber pilots, her true identity finally revealed. "Major Chen," Rodriguez said, extending her hand with genuine respect. "I don't know how to properly thank you for saving our mission and possibly our lives by being the kind of pilot who would do exactly the same for someone else," Jessica replied, shaking her hand firmly. "And by remembering that the person flying cargo runs might know more about strategic bombing than anyone else in the squadron." Over the following weeks, the story of the transport pilot who saved 2 B-2 bombers became legendary throughout Strategic Air Command. But for those who knew the complete truth, it served as a powerful reminder that heroes don't always wear obvious uniforms, and the most critical missions are often carried out by people who choose to remain completely invisible. Major Bradley, who dismissively called Jessica bus driver and questioned her knowledge, quietly requested additional training on advanced threat recognition. He couldn't face the daily reminder that someone whose expertise so completely surpassed his own had been dismissed as a mere cargo pilot, and whose quiet competence had exposed his arrogance and fundamental lack of experience with real threats. Major Jessica Chen returned to her classified strategic bomber duties, but her counterintelligence mission had taught her something invaluable about perception, respect, and the nature of true expertise. Sometimes the most important and dangerous work is accomplished by people others choose not to see, and genuine expertise doesn't require recognition or acknowledgement to protect national security and save lives. The B-2 Spirit program continued to advance under enhanced security procedures, protected by upgraded counterintelligence protocols, and guided by pilots who finally understood that stealth technology requires more than invisible aircraft. It requires invisible heroes willing to work in the shadows, sacrifice recognition, and risk everything to keep their fellow warriors and their nation safe. In the months that followed, Major Rodriguez became one of the Air Force's most skilled B-2 pilots, crediting the intercept experience and Jessica's guidance with teaching her lessons about strategic thinking, threat assessment, and humility that no training program could provide. She never forgot that sometimes the most important knowledge comes from the most unexpected sources. The transport operations at Whiteman Air Force Base gained new respect throughout the wing, as bomber pilots finally understood that the people who managed their logistics and support possessed knowledge and experience that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The invisible became visible, and expertise was recognized regardless of assignment or apparent job function. Years later, when young bomber pilots asked about the most important lessons for strategic operations, senior officers would tell them about the transport pilot who saved 2 B-2s from Chinese interceptors. The lesson was always the same. Never underestimate someone based on their current assignment, because the most dangerous threats often come from the most unexpected directions, and the most valuable allies are frequently the ones others choose to ignore.